Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and I'm going to show you how I painted these citrus slices. So I'm working on a 12-inch by 16-inch canvas, and what I'm doing is tracing these different size circles on my canvas. I'm using Tupperware, plastic cups, plastic bowls. You can find various sized circles around your house and use those to trace onto your canvas. This painting also has half circle shapes, and to do the half circle, it's really easy. You would just trace half the circle, use a straight edge or ruler to draw that straight line, and then erase part of the circle that sort of extends back of that line. So there's really no right or wrong way to trace these circles. You would just kind of have fun and create a composition of circles. It looks interesting when a few are going off the canvas. It looks interesting when the half circles are kind of going in different directions. Definitely vary your size of the circles. That's why I'm doing different sizes, and just kind of play around with the composition. This is a great painting for kids to kind of teach about how to balance a composition in a piece of artwork. We also have overlapping going on. We have a variety of sizes. We have shapes that are going off the canvas. So there's a lot of different elements going on here. And the composition also works vertically for this. So we can have the orientation of our painting going vertically or horizontally, or whichever you decide. This is a big flat brush that I'm using to brush off all the eraser marks. It works perfectly for doing that so that we don't smear the pencil marks when you erase. So I think I'm going to settle with this many fruits, and I'm going to start with the background of the painting. Now the background was done with bright aqua green and titanium white. I'm going to use the 3/4 inch flat brush and load it in the aqua and a little bit of white. That white is just to give it a little bit of a variety in color. It's not exactly necessary, but I wanted that aqua to be just a tad bit lighter than the pure form of it, and I like having the white kind of streak in the background, so it has some interesting colors in there. I'm also using the 12 bright brush to kind of cut in around the shape. This is kind of the challenge of this painting when doing the background, because you have all these angled areas to get around. But if you're using the smaller brush, that's the 12 bright brush, you can use that to outline the shape and then fill in the background area around it. Now, the background of this painting is also flexible in the sense that you can change the color of it. There's a lot of different color combos you can do. You can do a black background. You can do a background that is a different color from the citrus slices. So any color that would kind of stand out from the colorful nature of the citrus slices. You could even do like a hot pink color. I think that would look really pretty. But I love using aqua in a lot of my paintings, so I chose the aqua background. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm just kind of filling it in. I'm making sure that all my strokes are going vertical. I'm not changing the direction of the strokes. I suppose that if your painting was a vertical painting, you would have your strokes kind of go in that direction as well. But since mine is going to be horizontal, I'm having my strokes go vertical. You could also have your strokes kind of contour in the shape. So the direction of the strokes will kind of go in the direction of the shape. So they would go in all different directions. And then another alternative would be to paint the entire background first and then draw the citrus slices and then paint all the shapes white first, and then you would do the color. So there's different ways you can go about doing this painting. So I am going to actually go silent here for just a bit as I'm filling in the entire background. It does take a little bit of time to do, but just take your time and make sure you get all of that canvas filled up. Okay, now would be a good time to paint the sides of the canvas. So I'm doing the same color for the sides. And I wasn't sure if I was going to have the color of the citrus slices extend on the sides as well. But for now, I'm just going to paint it a solid aqua and white. And then also you can add a little bit of water to your brush to kind of get the paint to flow a little bit faster on the sides, especially right now the paint is almost gone on my palette. So if I didn't want to add more paint to my palette, I can just add a tiny bit of water to my brush. And so that is what I'm doing, painting the sides of our canvas. For this next step, you don't technically need to wait for this to dry. But if you feel like the background is really super wet, you may want to step back and wait just a little bit because the next step is going to be we're painting the insides of the shapes. So I have a palette of some new colors here. We have Cad Orange Hue, Primary Yellow, Deep Green Permanent, and Titanium White. These colors are listed in the tutorial. I am using a number 4 round brush, and what I'm doing is simply outlining the shape. So I have the pencil drawing. I'm outlining it using the round brush and the color. So you kind of have to plan a little bit when you're doing this because, okay, so the large circle is going to be the grapefruit, and that's got the orange rind to it. But the smaller ones may be yellow or green or orange for an orange. So you kind of have to plan that. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm outlining the shape with the color, and also I like to add a little bit of titanium white to it because it changes sort of the color of it. It makes it a little bit lighter, and also because it creates more of an opaqueness with the color. So adding white to it makes it so it will cover that background a little bit better. And also notice that my stroke is a little bit thick. It's definitely thicker than my pencil drawing. So part of it is going to overlap that background. So you can essentially that pencil is right there in the middle of that stroke, but it doesn't have to be exactly in the middle. If you want to paint it just on the inside of the circle, you can, or if you want to paint it on the outside of that circle, you can. So with my yellow, my lemons, definitely add a little bit of titanium white to your yellow because that'll create the opaqueness in the yellow. The opaqueness is simply how you can see through the color or not. Yellow is a very see-through color, but adding white into the yellow will make it not so see-through, and also adding white into that yellow makes that lemon look more of like a lemon color, like lemon yellow. Okay, so I am just going to continue to outline my circles. This one in the lower left ended up turning into a grapefruit later on in the painting. So it started out yellow, and later on I decided it needed to be orange because it's a larger shape. So you're going to have to kind of plan on what you're doing. And then also you can change your colors later on. So if you decide that this lemon right here should be a lime, wait for it to dry and you can just paint over it green later. So it's not a big deal. I am going to go silent here as I finish this step of painting all the outside parts of my fruit slices. Okay, so we outlined all the outer parts of our fruits, and now we're going to work on the flesh part of the fruit. That's the inside. I am going to start with the grapefruit, and this is a really pretty color. This is actually called primary red. It is a red that has a pink looking tone to it. So it's a red that looks pink almost. And I'm going to also freshen up my titanium white or use the white that's already on my palette if it's still wet. I'm going to use a 12 bright brush and load it in the primary red and a little bit of white. And when I paint, I'm going to use the full width of the stroke, and it's going to go sort of in a radial direction, kind of like an asterisk direction, starburst. So we got to think about where the center part of that circle is, and or a wagon wheel. That's a good way to describe it. But the direction of each stroke is going to go in the direction of the circle. So you're going to kind of eyeball where that middle is, and you're going to do your stroke starting from the edge of the circle, and I'm stroking towards the middle. Now notice how I'm leaving sort of a white gap between the rind, that's the outer part, that part that we outlined, between that and where the flesh is. You don't technically have to leave that gap there. If you make your stroke go and touch the orange, that's fine. I left that gap because it was kind of easier to not touch the orange, and then I didn't have to go back and touch it up later. But that's what I'm doing here. Super simple, and you can see that white helps to create that sort of texture already with the flesh of the fruit. So I'm going back in there and sort of just touching it up and making sure that's all filled in, and that is the base layer of my fruit. And I'm going to do this to all of my shapes. I'm going to use my 12 bright, use the color of it, make it go in a wagon wheel direction, going circular, and filling it in with that color. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I decided that I loved that grapefruit color so much that I needed another grapefruit in my painting. So that is why I'm changing this yellow one to an orange rind. And that's what I mentioned earlier. If you wanted to change the color of one of your fruits, super easy. You would just paint over it. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to load it in the primary red and a little bit of white. Kind of estimate where that center of the circle is. It might be kind of hard to estimate, especially for the ones that are kind of going off the canvas. But if you make a good guess, then that should be fine. And do the direction of your strokes going in a sort of wagon wheel direction, going towards the center. And then a couple coats of paint to cover it up. Okay, so when you're switching to the next color, rinse your brush off, and I'm going to do the orange one. The orange one, I decided, you can see what I'm doing on my palette there, I mixed orange with white and a little bit of yellow, just to make it kind of a different color than the rind, because the rind is a solid orange color with a little bit of white. By adding that little bit of yellow in there, it changed the color of the orange to more of a yellow-orange color. And the same thing with the half circles. You're still going to go in sort of the wagon wheel direction, making the direction of your strokes go in that direction. Only you got to think it's a half circle. Okay, so for this one, it was kind of a challenge because it's behind those lines, so just do the best you can. For the smaller ones, if you feel more comfortable using your round brush, you can grab your round brush, and that'll get into the smaller areas of the circles. So for the lemon color, it's yellow with white. So I mixed yellow and white together. That makes that a really light lemon yellow color. And same thing, use the full width of your stroke to go in a wagon wheel direction. And I'm not even leaving that much of a gap right there with the rind, and that's okay. Keep in mind that we're going to be painting that white sort of inner part of the fruit later with white paint, so you don't have to really worry about it. If it goes all the way to the edge of that fruit shape, that is fine. Okay, so that one, it went all the way to the edge. All right, so this video is sped up a little bit, so please press pause when you need to. Do not paint as fast as I am because I'm not painting this fast in real life. It's the video speeding up. For the limes, I actually loaded my palette with Brilliant Yellow Green. I love this color. I use it in a lot of my paintings. It's such a pretty, bright, cheerful green color, but it's called Brilliant Yellow Green, and I'm using the round brush for this because it's a smaller shape. And so, but still kind of the same concept. Have your strokes go in that sort of wagon wheel direction from the middle going outwards, sort of a starburst shape. And you can see how it's a little bit easier to actually do this with the round brush with that Brilliant Yellow Green. And I don't think I added any white in my Brilliant Yellow Green because it was such a perfect lime color to use, lime green. So this one, I actually tried to leave a little bit of a white gap between the rind and the flesh of the fruit. Now that we have the base of our flesh color of the fruit painted in, we're going to paint the white part that's on underneath the rind of the fruit. This is titanium white and the number 4 round brush, and I am painting a white circle just next to, on the inside part of the colored circle. Okay, so that is what I'm doing there. I messed up right there. It's the beauty of acrylics because you can just grab that other color and it paints right over it. So you're going to do that to all of your fruit shapes, but actually I'm going to show you here quickly how this is going to happen with the dividing of the fruit slices. So I'm going to find the center part of the circle and paint a dot, and I'm going to divide it up like a pizza. So I'm going to paint my line, kind of a really loose line. I'm not really looking for perfection and having it be straight or anything. And I'm just going to kind of divide it up. Now I could have the line go all the way across, and I think I did that later on with my other fruits because I found it easier to do it that way. But I'm just drawing lines and dividing my fruit up like a pizza. And see how the line's kind of loose. I know my hand is covering that right there, but painting the very tip of my brush has the paint, and I'm holding it very loosely to create that thin sort of uneven line. And then our triangular shapes are kind of rounded. They're rounded at the base, but they're also rounded at the corners, the bottom corner of each of them. So you would paint a curve on the corners of all of the fruit slices. So it would be a curve on the inside part of both sides of each of the triangles, and that makes the shape of the slice of the where you see the flesh of the fruit. The bottom part of the triangles are curved. So you're going to do that to all of your triangles. If you need to skip this step because it's too difficult, that's fine, especially if you're working with kids. If it's a little bit of a challenge for them, you can always simplify and skip. I know, I'm so sorry, my hand is covering right there, but all I'm doing is I'm rounding the corners of each of my slices. So round that curve, round that corner, and I'm going to fix this line right here, make it a little bit brighter. Round the curve, round the curve. All right. And then I'll go back later and touch up the color of the grapefruit. And I'm making that center circle just slightly bigger. Okay, so we have the base of our fruit and it's starting to look a little bit more like a sliced piece of grapefruit. So I am going to do this to all of my citrus slices. I'm going to go on to the next grapefruit and do the exact same thing. So outline the inner part of the circle and then estimate where your center is, divide it up. So this time I had my line go all the way across. It was much easier doing it that way. And then round the corners, the base of all the little corners. And remember that we could always do touch-ups later if you accidentally paint over a part of the rind or make your whites too thick. All right, so I am going to go on and do all of the citrus slices. In fact, I found it easier to do this kind of one step at a time, outlining all the inner parts of the circle next. So that's what I'm doing to all my fruits. And then when I'm done outlining the inner parts of the circle, then I go and divide them all up. Now I'm going to divide them all up like a pizza. For the half ones, the ones that are going off the canvas, just sort of estimate where you think that center is. And then, oh, really important, I don't think I even mentioned this. So with the half slices, the rind, you probably noticed already, the color of the outside of the fruit does not go on the straight part of it. So right here, you divide it kind of the same way, but that dark green is not on that straight part. Same with the orange. That orange outer part does not go on the straight part. So I failed to mention that earlier. So hopefully you followed that. If you didn't, you can always paint back over it. And so I'm going to round all of my the curves. Okay, so it's kind of easy with the smaller ones. You just kind of round it so that your triangular shape looks more like a teardrop shape. And then we can, like I said, we're going to touch up the flesh color after this step. So if you need to touch up your any part of the fruit, so you would just rinse the white off your brush and load it in the color that you need to touch up with. And you would go back in there and sort of make your triangle shape look more like a teardrop shape. So when you're done dividing your fruit up and rounding your corners, go back and add a second coat to your flesh color, and you can really define those shapes. It's got to look a lot like a teardrop shape, but with citrus, not all of them are exactly the same. They're unequal as far as size and maybe sort of shape goes, so you don't have to worry about perfection here. And the step after this, where when we add the texture to it, it's going to make the fruit look really cool. But for now, we're just adding a second coat to all of the flesh colors, making sure that everything is sort of defined, and that white sort of outline is not taking over. This is a painting that takes quite a bit of time, more time than I realized, but it's the type of painting where you just sort of zen out, and because the steps are really repetitive, so you're not really thinking too hard about what you're doing. You're just tuning out and painting. I love this grapefruit color. All it is primary red. It's such a pretty color. We're going to do the texture next, and you don't technically have to have your flesh colors dried for the texture. This is a tiny spotter brush. It's got the tiny bristles on it, and I believe it's a 5-0. I know I listed exactly what it was in the tutorial, but we're going to freshen up our titanium white. And we're going to use this brush to paint the texture on the fruit slices, the highlights of the fruit pouches, or I'm not even sure what the technical term of that is, but it is what gives the citrus slice its juicy texture. We're going to call it juicy texture. So what I'm doing is painting these very, very tiny lines. They're all different lengths. They're not all the same lengths. In fact, some are thicker and some are thinner. Some areas it's just kind of a dot or a blob. Other areas I'm adding a little bit of red in there. Why not? To make the little line a different color. So I'm doing a variety of lines. They're all going in that wagon wheel direction, and they are sort of uneven, loose lines. They're not perfectly straight, and they need to hold the brush lightly to create those thin lines, and that's what's creating this texture. So I love the look of just doing the little dots. So I did a lot of little dots in there. It gives it that extra juicy texture look. And so it's actually just really simple painting these little lines, and it creates that really cool citrus texture that makes this painting look extra pretty. And then since I have this really nice fine detail brush in my hand, I'm actually using it to touch up the outer part of the white part of the shape. And so you can do that as well. So just keep adding these little texture lines to it. I don't think you can do too much. Actually, if you did too much, the whole thing would turn white. So just kind of make enough to make it look like it's got enough juicy texture to it. And I'm also using this brush to sort of touch up the outer part of my rind, especially since a lot of that background's just kind of showing through. It looks kind of dark, so I can add the second coat in there using that really small brush, and it really helps you control the line because the bristles are so small. And I did link to these brushes. I found these brushes on Amazon, and I really like them because of the handle of the brush. It has kind of a thicker handle in the area that you hold onto the brush. So it allows you to use this brush with more control because of the way the handle is shaped. So I really like these. I do list them where I found them on Amazon because I really like them. It comes in a pack and it's got all these different sizes. It's got a 10-0, a 5-0. I think it's a 2. Oh, you know what? This one, now that I looked at the tutorial, it's actually, this is a number 2 spotter brush. So, but sometimes, in my opinion, when you're using a spotter brush, it doesn't really matter if you're using the 5-0 or the 10-0 or the 2 or the 1 or the 0. They've all got small bristles, and you're able to control the smaller stroke with it. All right, so I am just going to repeat what I did to each and every one of those slices. Again, Zen moment takes a while, but you just totally tune everything out because it's a lot of repetitive steps. It's super relaxing. So with the lemon, I actually loaded some of the primary yellow in there as well. So this is yellow and white, just to give it that little color variety. You don't have to do that. If you don't want to load in the color plus the white, if you want to just do the texture with just white to simplify things, you can do it that way. I love the way the texture looks on this lime, and I actually added a little bit of dark green in there later on because it gave it that a little bit of an extra texture look to it. But you just want to be careful with these really small slices that you're making your strokes really tiny, especially just tiny little dots in there so they're not so big. Okay, here is where I'm going to add just a little bit of the deep green permanent in there. That's that darker green, the color of the rind, the outer part. So adding just that dark green in there gives it just a little bit of a more interesting variety look in the texture. Again, you don't have to do that. Sometimes adding that extra color makes it a little bit more fun than just doing the same color over and over again. And I really like how that dark green looks in there. You just want to make sure that if you are adding a color in there and then going on to the next fruit slice, just make sure you rinse your brush, dry it off to get all the extra color off of it. I know the right side of my palette is kind of hiding, but I'm adding a little bit of orange in my texture for this one. All right, so now that we have all our texture done, we're going to add something fun to the background, and we're going to call these bubbles. So I guess our fruit slices are in a big glass of water or something, but these are little tiny dots using using the 4-round brush to do this, but you can do this with that spotter brush if you want. Different variety of sizes with the circles, so some are sort of thicker, some are thinner. They're all in clusters. Imagine if this was a big glass of carbonated water and all the fruit slices are just kind of floating or going to the bottom or just floating in the middle, but you have the little bubbles coming up from the glass of water. So that's kind of the impression I'm trying to create here, although it's abstract. It doesn't really have to be anything. And it really adds a fun touch to the background. And then some of the bubbles are overlapping some of the fruits. There's a lot of overlapping in this painting. A lot of, we have texture, we have overlapping, we have composition. This is actually a really good painting to do as if you're an art teacher and you're teaching about the elements of art and principles of design. There's a lot of things going on in this painting. So you can just add as many dots as you want. Too many and it might be a little bit too busy. But a lot of blue space still showing, so it's not covering the entire painting. Okay, and then I also decided that there needs to be another fruit in this painting. So there's this blank area, and at the time it was kind of bothering me, and I felt like there should be another piece of fruit here, although I still think it looks fine without that fruit there, now that I look back at it. But if you wanted to add more citrus slices somewhere in your painting, it was really simple. Just trace your circle again, paint it white, and do the same steps again that you did to render your fruit. And then this also shows you that you can paint the entire background first and do your white circles and then do the fruit. So it was actually a little bit easier to do it this way, doing the white and then rendering the fruit. So this one became a lemon. And so I painted the white and then I followed the steps for rendering the fruit. This is the last step that I am doing in my citrus composition painting. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful and that you enjoyed painting these citrus slices with me. A fun summer tutorial to do. A good one to do with the kids. Definitely can be simplified, or it can be rendered even further if you wanted to make them super realistic. But there's a lot of direction that you can go with this painting, with color customization, and like I said, a lot of elements in this painting if you're teaching an art lesson to your kids. But I hope that you enjoyed watching. Thanks for painting with me.